Thank you there to the News Desk team, and now I'm delighted to be joined with the Reverend Eldon Phillips. And Eldon, regular listeners will remember, came in to talk to us before Christmas about his proposed trip to India. Well, now I'm delighted to say that Eldon has made it to the subcontinent of India, and he's made it back home safely. And Eldon, I'm glad that you're back with us, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your trip to India.
Yes, Rob, I'm glad to be back, but it was a special trip, I must be honest. It was my second trip, as I said to the listeners before I went. This is my second trip to India. Not quite so long as the 5.5 weeks, 6 weeks I spent 3 years ago in 2009. This time slightly shorter, just under 3 weeks, just over 2 weeks. But it was very special and very different. What I planned was, or what had been planned for me really, was to revisit the city of Llanelli, and that was towards the end of this trip, but also to experience something entirely different in India. And that was to stay in a centre. The centre was called the Women's Workers Training Centre. It was run by 2 or 3 Church of South India nuns. And the work that they did there was quite remarkable.
Excellent. So remind me now that you actually went 3 years ago to Llanelli, and how did that start? I mean, where did the idea come from to go to India?
Well, it came from an advert in a magazine, actually. The USPG, United Society of the Propagation of the Gospel, which is a missionary charity organisation. They offered placements. Expanding Horizons was the title of the placement, for clergy and ministers in this country to experience something in Asia, Africa, South America, that's related to the work that they do actually in this country. And of course, at that time, as at now, I'm a hospital chaplain in Singleton in Swansea. And so I just fancied it and just took it up, and it just snowballed from there. So the last trip, as I said earlier on, was really about looking at healthcare in India and experiencing healthcare. This trip now was something slightly different.
Right.
This trip, again, organised by the same people who had organised my last trip. But Jesse and Anand, who came from Llanelli, wanted me to experience this rural experience in India. Now, I spent over a week and a half, in fact, in this village called Nagapularam. And this was quite a remote village in its own self. And in the middle, on the fringe of the village, was this centre that was run by the Church of South India, specifically run by these nuns who had been running it for about 20 to 30 years. And it's quite well renowned, this. What they do, basically, is that they service and they instigate programs to help the villages around the village where the centre was. And they were working in more than 30 isolated Indian villages. And they'd started these programs to really benefit, initially women, but it had broadened now. It was for everyone, really. And where they had started projects that were ongoing and successful were related to things like herbal medicine, to things like water supply, to things like organic farming, preschool education.
Right.
So what they wanted me to do is to go to these different villages to see how the projects were working, and to perhaps even suggest, not that I was any authority to suggest anything, but just to go along and see what they'd done and to meet the people. And it was quite remarkable, Rob, because to get to these villages was a major achievement.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, we all forget really how vast a place India is, and I mean, I'm guessing that you flew into a city, and then these places were fairly remote. Then
I flew into the city, and I got a taste of what Sister Kachura, who was the head of this program. The type of person she was. I flew into Trivandrum at 3:15 in the morning, right? And I did say to her, look, I'll stay in a hotel, and I'll find my way, blah, blah, blah. No. John, the driver, with his 4x4 that they had a 4x4, pretty crocked out 4x4, to be honest with you. He and Sister Kashura met me in Trivandrum Airport at 3:15 in the morning when the flight came in. They'd driven 6 hours.
Good grief. Yeah.
And so it was another 6 hours to get back there again.
Yeah.
So that's I understood what this was all about then. Yeah. So I got there, I was tired, and then the next week I worked there, and we'd go to these villages that were so remote. To get there, we used our 4x4, the one 4x4 that picked me up in the airport. Yeah. But to get there, you had to go through tracks, bumps in the road. You went over maize that had been spread on the road, on the track, ready for vehicles to go over it so they could cultivate it better and sell it better.
Good grief.
That's the type of thing. So you go to these remote villages and you'd speak to people and you'd find out what they were doing. And I did this, it was a full program that I went to. And to give you examples of the experiences I had, one evening we went to one of the most remote villages to meet with the elders. But all of the village, there were 200 people in the village, right? They were all out. They were slicing, that's the wrong word. They were peeling onions.
Oh, well.
They were peeling, and there were mountains of onions there because the merchant, the buyer, was coming the next morning to buy the onions from the people in the village. That would keep them going. Yeah. That was their subsistence. That was their income, because they cultivated onions in the fields around, you see. Oh, well. And the irony of India, perhaps, is that 3 years ago, I knew this was happening. The government of India placed a TV set in every single house in India 3 years ago. So every single hut or mud hut or whatever it was had a TV in the corner of the room. So you had like one room, which was everything, right? Yeah. And there was also a TV in the corner of the room. So that's the irony of India,
Yeah. But the irony of that really is that people see what's the other side of the coin from that poverty, don't they? And they do. And obviously they aspire to get out of that.
And of course, I think I said this to you last time. The young people, the children who go to school, and they go to school in their beautiful school uniforms that's are spotlessly clean because it's so hot they can wash it. They'll go home then and they'll turn on the telly, right? And what the boys particularly, but the girls as well, what they want to see they want to see Manchester United, they want to see Liverpool, Barcelona. So football is huge for young, and they all have got their, that they bought very cheaply, their kit, And when I was out there, of course, Swansea beat Arsenal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And this was headlines in the newspaper, in the Hindi Times, in the back page, honestly, I still got the cutting. Headlines, shock for Arsenal at Liberty Stadium.
Yeah, well. How did you manage with it? Was there a huge language difference then? Did you have a translator?
Yes, I had a translator because, once a month, all of the people who were involved in the projects in the villages came to the centre in Nagapularam, right? They came to get paid. They came to get paid because they would give, the centre and the Church of South India would pay them. Not a great deal, but they pay them. So all the people involved in herbal medicine and in preschool education and the facilitators, as they called them, who started things like water supplies, whatever, they'd all come together. And we met under this sort of canopy of I don't know what it was really, but it was open air, but a canopy over us. It was something out of a sort of an African summit meeting, with whoever. And they'd share what they'd done. They'd share stories, they'd share ideas, but it was all done in Tamil, which is which is the language of the place. Now it was my turn to have my input as well because I'd been with them a week, you see. So I had to tell them stories. I tell them stories and sing. I sing my singing. I just sing a song to them. I sang Sosman Vach to them. I did.
We should have had a recording of that.
There was no translator there for Sosman Vach. But when I was telling him the stories, I had a Tamil translator next to me, one of the girls there who worked in the centre, and she would translate it all.
Excellent. We're sitting here shivering in the studio in the sort of middle of the winter. What are the temperatures like out there?
I thought, Rob, that I would be going in the cooler period, right? January. Little did I know just as hot as it was in March, April. In the day, 28, 34 degrees centigrade. In the night, down to 25, but that was a fallacy because it got so humid in the night. And again, this is a lovely little anecdotal story. We knew what times the electricity would go off in the centre. It would go off regularly every night between 10 and 10:30. And it would go off, say, between 7 and 7:30 in the morning. and 4:30. It was it was as if they had to regenerate all the electricity supplies. I was going to go to bed at 10 o'clock because that's the time to go to bed. But inevitably, I didn't go to bed because the electricity went off, and that meant my fan went off.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I couldn't bear the humidity and the heat in my room. So I had to go down to the office of the centre, and they had a generator there, and the fan was working off the generator. But I couldn't stick it in my room because it was just so hot and so humid and so humid. So it was...
Well, anyway, Eldon, it's nice to be back to the cooler climes of Llanelli. We're all delighted that you've had a great trip to India, and hopefully you'll come in and talk to us again about any other forthcoming projects you've got. Thank you very much, Eldon.
Absolute pleasure, Rob, and that I can share to my India trip. And perhaps to be fair to my wife Beth, I better stay at home for a short spell now.
Good show. Well done. Thank you, Eldon.
Thank you.